Wellington, Ohio, a town where Sunday sermons echo louder than car horns and the stillness of morning carries with it a quiet kind of pride. The Petric home sits neatly at the end of a cul-de-sac. Its windows glow amber with morning light, casting fractured rainbows through stained glass onto polished floors. Inside, the family is gathered around the breakfast table. Mark, the father and a respected pastor, leads a solemn prayer. Sue, warm and steady, folds her hands beside him. Their children, Heidi, Holly, and the youngest, Danny, sit quietly, heads bowed, their movements rehearsed by years of repetition. From the outside, it's a portrait of peace and faith, but linger too long and something unsettled begins to surface. A stiffness in posture, a breath held too long. In this house, faith is not just belief, it is expectation. And Danny, though present, seems somewhere else entirely. To outsiders, the Petric household was flawless, a devout pastor's family built on scripture, discipline, and routine. But beneath the stained glass and folded hands, pressure simmered, a quiet, invisible strain pressing inward. Daniel Petric's early development took shape under the watchful eye of both family and faith. His father embodied moral certainty, his mother emotional gentleness, but even her softness yielded to the authority of scripture and order. In this environment, Daniel learned that love was often conditional and identity was measured by conformity. He grew up performing, not acting out, but acting right, until the mask no longer fit. But an event that happened that winter changed his life. Fluorescent hospital lights flicker above as a teenage boy lies motionless beneath sterile white sheets. Beyond the frost-glazed window pane, snow drifts gently, blanketing the world in silence. Once a whirlwind on the field, he now stares at the ceiling, his body subdued, his identity quietly unraveling with each passing hour of stillness. 3 months of being bedridden caused him to become isolated, physically sluggish, and emotionally numb. He experienced situational depression characterized by withdrawal, loss of appetite, sleep problems, and a loss of interest in activities that used to be enjoyable. Danny's identity as an athlete, his primary source of pride and social belonging, was stripped away after a snowboarding accident and a subsequent staph infection. 3 months of being bedridden caused him to become isolated, physically sluggish, and emotionally numb. He experienced situational depression characterized by withdrawal, loss of appetite, sleep problems, and a loss of interest in activities that used to be enjoyable. During this time, his world narrowed. His parents, trying to ease his boredom, bought him an Xbox. But in that device, Danny didn't just find entertainment, he found control. In the virtual worlds of Halo and Call of Duty, he was strong, skillful, unstoppable. It was everything reality had denied him. Silence blankets the Petric home. It's nearly 3 a.m. The house sleeps, except for one figure creeping through the front door. Danny slips inside, breath shallow, eyes darting. In his hands, a freshly unwrapped copy of Halo 3, clutched like a stolen treasure. Every step creaks louder than the last on the aging wooden floor. Suddenly, click, a hallway light flickers on. Sue stands at the end of the hall, barefoot in her robe. Her eyes, tired, tender, disillusioned, lock onto his. She doesn't yell, doesn't scold, just stares. Daniel was really immersed in these games, running away from home to buy Halo 3 at night like that was the source of future tragedies. This led to Mark confiscating the Halo 3 that Daniel had just bought. Mark kneels before the family's steel lockbox. His hands move with a practiced patience. Steady, unspeaking. He unlocks the lid and opens it slowly, revealing 2 items side by side. The newly confiscated Halo 3 disc, its cover still glossy beneath the dim light, and the cold, unmistakable shape of a 9mm pistol. The juxtaposition is chilling, entertainment and lethality bound by the same key. He places the disc in beside the gun. No words, just the cold, mechanical click of the lock slamming shut. Louder than a slam, sharper than a slap. In Danny's mind, it echoes like a gunshot. The line between control and humiliation has just been drawn, and behind Danny's eyes, something shifts. To them, it was just a game. To him, it was freedom, his only window into control, mastery, escape. When they took it away, they didn't just confiscate a disc. They shattered the fragile illusion that he still owned any part of his life. The confiscation of Halo 3 wasn't a trivial punishment. For Danny, it was a symbolic annihilation of his only perceived freedom. The same lockbox that held the forbidden game also contained a deadly weapon. The act of merging those two symbols, pleasure and violence, autonomy and control, was psychologically explosive. In psychological terms, Danny experienced ego threat, a perceived attack on his core self, combined with underdeveloped impulse control, typical of a 16-year-old brain. And the high emotionality of adolescence, this created a dangerous cocktail. His rebellion wasn't just teenage angst, it was identity warfare. October 20th, 2007, the late afternoon light spills through the half-drawn blinds, striping the living room in bars of warm gold and shadow. Mark Petric reclines on the family couch, remote in hand, waiting for the Cleveland Indians playoff game to begin. Nearby, Sue sits at her vanity mirror applying makeup. The mood is subdued but familiar, a domestic lull after a day of shared chores. Danny enters the room, his expression composed but unreadable. He walks slowly, deliberately, his hand concealed behind his back.
Mom, Dad, close your eyes. I got a surprise for you guys.
"I have a surprise for you," he says, his voice even, almost gentle, "but you have to close your eyes." Sue, still looking at her reflection, complies without suspicion. Mark lowers the remote and closes his eyes too, believing, perhaps, this is a teenage attempt at reconciliation. And then, without hesitation, Danny raises the 9mm handgun he had taken from the lockbox. He fires once at his father's head, point blank. The bullet enters near the temple, fracturing bone, but miraculously fails to kill. Sue turns, startled, not yet screaming, just beginning to process. He shoots again. This time it is fatal. The bullet strikes her in the face and she falls instantly. Mark, bloodied and disoriented, regains a flicker of consciousness. As he lies bleeding, Danny sits beside him, placing the gun in his father's open hand, an effort to stage the scene as a murder-suicide. There is no panic in him, no trembling hands. It is cold, surreal, mechanical. Moments later, the front door opens. Heidi, Danny's sister, and her husband Andy step inside. Danny attempts to block them. Heidi hears something, a groan, a whisper. Pushing past him, she sees her mother's lifeless body and her father clinging to life. Andy wrests the gun from Danny. Heidi calls 911. Danny, detached and eerily calm, flees in the family minivan with the copy of Halo 3 on the passenger seat beside him. He promised a surprise, and delivered one soaked in silence and calculation. It wasn't reconciliation he brought into that room, but the cold machinery of vengeance. What looked like calm was control. What followed wasn't regret, it was fury, cloaked in precision, masquerading as peace. This is the moment when suppressed emotion crystallized into action. Danny retrieved both the game and the 9mm. His plan was disturbingly methodical, asking them to close their eyes before executing them. This signifies premeditation and emotional detachment.
Alright, have a seat in the car. What's your name? Daniel Petric. Alright, Daniel, have a seat in the car.
Yet what follows is key. Danny didn't flee immediately. He sat next to his father, placed the gun in his lap, and tried to stage a murder-suicide. This indicates magical thinking, a cognitive distortion where the perpetrator believes they can manipulate the narrative or consequences through symbolic actions. His detachment post-crime, driving away with Halo 3, calling a friend without emotion, suggests acute dissociation, often triggered by trauma or extreme cognitive dissonance. After that, a sterile visitation booth bathed in cold fluorescent light. A pane of glass divides two worlds. On one side, Heidi and Holly, dressed in muted tones, their expressions weighted with disbelief and fragile hope. On the other side, Danny, clad in an orange jumpsuit, sits with his shoulders hunched, hands fidgeting beneath the metal table bolted to the floor. His eyes never rise to meet theirs. The room hums with an unnatural quiet. Heidi gently speaks his name. Holly's eyes fill but do not spill. Danny remains still for a moment, as though paralyzed by the enormity of their presence. When he finally speaks, his voice is thin and uneven, barely above a whisper.
Prison isn't a place I've been prior to this. You're separated from your family, separated from society, the rest of the world, and no, that's definitely not something I understood.
There is no anger in their gaze, only pain, and the aching weight of memories that now feel fractured and unreachable. Danny doesn't cry, not yet, but the cracks are beginning to show. He broke down, but not immediately. At first, he denied, then he confessed. Later, he cried. After the arrest, Danny showed no initial remorse, but during family visits, his mask cracked. At 22 in prison, he gave a heartfelt interview expressing regret, especially toward his mother. This remorse was real, but it was delayed. His late remorse points to the concept of moral development lag. At 16, Danny's moral reasoning was underdeveloped. He could not fully grasp the permanence of death or the scale of his actions. Only later, when his brain matured and external stimuli slowed, did empathy resurface. His case is not one of innate evil, but of compounded vulnerability. Depression, identity loss, unprocessed anger, toxic shame, and immature neurodevelopment created a perfect storm. Some tragedies begin with violence, others begin in silence. Danny's began with pain and ended in blood, but somewhere in between there was love and the ghost of a chance.